Okay. So today joining Community, we have Melisa Rojas. She has a bachelor's in psychology from Pomona College and a master's in education from Boston University. She's worked as a middle school and science teacher in the Boston Public Schools and an educator at the Boston Museum of Science, and is currently an educator and student mentor at the MIT Museum, where she leads the Teen Youth Council and the Teen Internship, amongst various other initiatives. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. Could you please expand on the educational and professional journey that's led you to where you are right now?
Thank you, Ashi, for having me here. I'm excited to see what we're going to talk about today. So my educational journey and let's just start with that. Um, so I am the first in my family to go to college in the traditional sense. And that meant that when I was applying to undergraduate institutions that senior year of high school, I did not know what I was doing. And I took as much advice as I could from adults in my school. Um, and I saw my peers, going through the process of college applications. And I thought, well, I should probably do that too. And long story short, I ended up at Pomona College, which was an amazing undergraduate institution, and at the time was a really good fit for me. Um, it gave me the opportunity to explore liberal arts education, uh, which is wonderful when you want to expand skills and expertise in many different areas. And the goal, of course, is to be a well-rounded individual who has skills in diverse areas and knowledge in diverse areas. Um, when I first went to college, I wanted to pursue science in some way. It was definitely a love of mine. And in high school and elementary school, even, I always loved science. It was my favorite subject. I loved the curiosity that I could explore. I enjoyed even a little bit of the math, which is surprising for me to hear myself say because I also was a little bit anxious about math. And so I think that some of those experiences in childhood can help you either go one way or the other when it comes to STEM. And I think it really depends on the teachers and adults in your life. And I was lucky that once I got through high school, my science teachers were extremely encouraging and very supportive of me pursuing higher education and STEM. And of course, I've always had the love and support of my parents, which, is something that's really special and I'm grateful for. Um, and they always believed that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So once I got to college, I explored many different subjects until I finally found my love in psychology. I was able to do research in the neuroscience departments and psychology departments of the Claremont colleges. Um, and then I also found my love in working with students. So I've worked with youth for as long as I can remember. When you're in high school, you have opportunities to volunteer with younger students, or you get to support um, even let's say first year and sophomore students as a junior or senior in different programs. Um, and then when I was in undergraduate um, education, I taught in a classroom as a teaching assistant, and I um, worked in behavioral therapy for students with or for children with autism, and did some research there in play-based therapies. And so all of this work came together in an interest in teaching science. I started with Teach for America, and I was placed in Boston Public Schools, where I was really grateful to get to work with these really wonderful students and their families and other teachers at my school. Being able to teach science was really fun because I got to be, hopefully, someone who would help young people see that they could be scientists too and they could pursue STEM as much as they were interested in it. Once I did that, I started exploring what was the difference between formal education and informal education. And I saw that it was a lot of fun to work in science museums. Um, and I tried something different. I ended up working as an educator at the Museum of Science in Boston. While I was there, I was able to work with many more age groups. I was able to work with babies, toddlers, young children, adults, and elders, and see that it was a really special thing to be able to encourage curiosity and learning in many, many people in any given day. Um, and I really loved that as well. But I missed developing relationships with students over a longer period of time. While I was there, I was able to supervise a couple of teen internship programs, and I really loved it. I was able to kind of have the best of both worlds where I could support people of all ages in their curiosity in STEM, and at the same time had the opportunity to work closer with students over a longer period of time and kind of see them grow, be there for them, support them through their journeys in STEM or wherever direction they wanted to go. And now at the MIT Museum, I took on additional responsibilities here, and I have many students that I've worked with over a long period of time. And I've seen them grow, and I've seen them go to college, and it is really special and something that um, I'm grateful for. And I will always be grateful for it because I don't know if this is I think is maybe a unique part of my story compared to maybe some of your other interviewees. I'm not sure, Ashi. But I'm actually going to leave the traditional workforce and be a full-time stay-at-home parent. Now, I think the privilege of that choice is a wonderful thing because now I'll get to foster STEM education in my own little ones, which is a really special thing. I just think it is a really cool thing to be able to see someone learn. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to see my own children learn and grow full time. So that's going to be happening very soon. Um, Starting this summer, I'll be a full-time stay-at-home parent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Melissa. So it seemed like early on, like in your high school years, there were educators who supported you and sort of led you into a career in STEM, and you knew you wanted to pursue STEM from a very young age. Was there anyone in particular who was an inspiration to you or sort of had that like defining mentor role that sort of led you into that career and sort of someone you think about right now as an educator and mentor?
Yes, I have several memories that come to mind that were really formative. Um, so I believe it was eighth grade. Yes, it was in eighth grade where I was feeling a lot of frustration in my math class. And a lot of that was because I actually felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. I wanted more from from my education at the time. And I shared that with my mother, and my mother shared that with the school. And they said that, well, she was placed in this level of math, and so that's where she's going to stay. I recall, and it was like sixth grade, where they did testing to see where the students in the middle, in the in the sixth grade, we're going to be placed for seventh grade.
Mm.
And that was where things were going to start to diverge. And some students were going to be taking different sort of levels of math. In fifth and sixth grade, I was having a lot of anxiety about math. In particular, the timed tests was not something I was good at. I felt a lot of pressure in those moments and did not perform well, um, to be frank. And I think a lot of those standardized tests maybe weren't accurate to my abilities.
Mm.
And well, I can actually say that with certainty because once me and my mother asked about it and continued to push back on it, we finally brought it to my teacher instead of the administration.
Mm.
And my teacher in the eighth grade saw that I was capable of maybe doing a little bit more. And she said, no, let's put her in the next level of math and see how she does. And it was because she believed in me and she supported me through it. And even though it felt challenging at first when they moved me up partway through the school year, she made sure that I felt like I could do it. And she made sure that even if it felt challenging at first to catch up with the other students, that it wasn't something that was insurmountable. And so I do think about her a lot, and I have reached out to her in the past just to share with her what a difference that made, because I think that in a lot of cases, standardized tests to place students in a certain level of math or science very early on is not going to be a fair way to assess their abilities or their future talents. And for me, being able to move up just that one level of math allowed me to then be able to pursue advanced levels of science and math in high school, which then put me in a better position when I got to college. So to see that something as seemingly small as a test in sixth grade can determine your course
Mm.
and your journey through higher education and career, that seems a little bit daunting to me and a little bit questionable. And I'm not sure how how students today are feeling with their standardized test requirements, but I have a feeling that there has to be a better way to help support students on their journey that is not so deterministic as you know, a simple test in the sixth grade.
Thank you for bringing that up. And it really was a memory and experience from like such a young age, like you were saying, that does span out into like the rest of your career and what choices and what opportunities you have later on. So turning more to like your current work, could you explain what a typical day in your position looks like?
Yeah. Um, so my title is at the MIT Museum is Youth and Community Engagement Coordinator. And there are a lot of different parts to my work. One of those areas is in supporting high school students in their goals and our different programs here. And those two programs, we have meetings every Saturday. We have our teen internship, and then we have the teen programming council. Um, the students apply for these programs, and it can be pretty competitive because sometimes, you know, there's only so many spots. And so that's always been a difficult part for me personally, as someone with personal experience with, um, you know, feeling like, oh, you know, this small decision might determine the rest of their life. Who knows? But I am very lucky that all of the students that are in our programs, pretty excited to be here, and it is a joy to work with them. And so in the teen internship, it is really led by what the students' goals are. We spend time debriefing and checking in at the beginning of the day, and then we spend time either working with the general public in our educational spaces at the MIT Museum, or we work on a project that we're doing research on, kind of behind the scenes. Right now, one of the big things that the teen interns are working on is a event titled Elevating Women's Health. And so a lot of work is being done in that area to create a big day where we're going to have some panelist experts in women's health and some hands-on activities to encourage more discussion and deeper thinking in these areas. And then after the interns are done working with us, we meet with the Teen Programming Council. And their major projects are putting on what we call Teen Science Cafes. And at these events, there's a guest speaker as well in some STEM area that the students choose ahead of time, that is of particular interest to them, and then hands-on activities that they design and lead themselves. Every day that we meet, we also check in and spend time seeing how we're all doing and just seeing if we have any highs and lows we want to share with each other before we dive into getting some of our work done for these big events that we're really proud to produce. Um, and I'm really there to support what their goals are, what the students want to accomplish, helping think through challenges and finding solutions in order to meet those goals, and making connections to uh, people at MIT to kind of have so those special opportunities to meet um, scientists, engineers, and so on. Um, the other area of my work is to meet with other members in the community and other organizations that serve youth in STEM. And that means that I get to meet a lot of really cool people with a lot of similar values and a similar mission to myself. And that's also been really special and a really amazing way for me to grow. So not only do I have the opportunity to work with my students who teach me every day, I also work with others in this professional community that continue to support me and think through professional challenges and ways to grow, and how do we all work together to make sure that young people in our community are getting those opportunities that they deserve and are able to pursue their interests in STEM in ways that are supportive and relevant and accessible. Um, so those are, I think, some of the major areas. And so a lot of meeting with people, a lot of working with people, and that's definitely something I like and I enjoy because I do like being around others and learning from them and hopefully sharing some of my own experiences with them too.
Thank you so much for that insight into your current position and profession. I know you mentioned that when you're working with these organization and other like community outreach for youth like STEM engagement, that you guys share the similar values. Could you expand on what those values are and how it sort of shapes your role as an educator and a mentor?
Yeah, so a really good example is there's a group of us who serve youth in STEM here in the community in different ways. And we've created a group called the Ambassadors of Spaces of Belonging. And the focus of our group is to meet that goal, meet that vision that all of our spaces that we work in are spaces where our students feel a sense of belonging. And to feel a sense of belonging and for everyone to feel that sense of belonging is work, because a lot of spaces were not initially created with that in mind. So to dive into that a little bit more, and what these values mean, a lot of people may have heard of like diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. Belonging attempts to bring that a bit further. Um, So it is really important that our spaces show representation of people of different races, backgrounds, ethnicities, sexualities, genders, and more. And it's also important that everyone who wants to participate feels that sense of being included and is able to access what the work and the activities might be. Depending on abilities or disabilities, it needs to be accessible. And then when it comes to equity, it means that any barriers to participating in your program or in your work, you actively work to break down those barriers in order to ensure that those who want to participate can, and there isn't something that's preventing them from doing so, such as um, a structural racism in the community or financial barriers or anything of that nature. And then the sense of belonging that you want to foster, that's really to attempt to retain people of many different backgrounds in your area. So it's one thing to get someone in the door and being able to get them there and make sure that there isn't a barrier for them to get started. It's another thing to see them grow and remain in STEM long term. And in order to do that, let's say that someone starts as a young student. In order to do that, they need to feel that they belong. Or it is, we feel it is our duty to ensure that they belong and that they feel that they belong. And in order for someone to feel that they belong somewhere, there's so many different layers to that. There's how the space is constructed. There's the people that run the space, people that work there, the people that work directly with the students. What is their training and background? Do they know how to work in a way that is welcoming to all students? Um, there are so many different considerations, and that's why in the group, the ambassadors of spaces of belonging, we know that this work is ongoing and that everyone has work to do in order to improve our respective spaces in order for them to be um, what we want them to be. And so being able to work with a cohort of professionals like that, we always push ourselves. We help each other through challenges when we feel that there are barriers to reaching our goals, let's say, in our respective institutions. Um, and even though you feel like, well, this should be easy, I can see that this is a good thing to do. Let's make those changes right away. A lot of times, a larger institution uh, will not allow changes to be made quickly. Some people call this bureaucracy, and it's just a word for the fact that there are like layers to decisions and different people that need to be involved in those decisions. And uh, there may be someone in charge of certain areas, but not others. And so that person has to work with somebody else in order to make a decision in an area of interest. And so sometimes um, it doesn't always work the way you think. But what does work the way we want it to is being able to actually meet with and talk with these other professionals here in the Cambridge area who are also wanting to meet the same goals and create this vision of belonging in all of our youth serving STEM areas.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You touched upon like a lot of points. So just to summarize, um, there's like DEI, and that's great for bringing in a diverse community, but in order to sustain that community, there's that value and piece of belonging that you work on. Is that correct?
Yes, I think right now, that's sort of like the sort of that next level that a lot of people maybe don't know about, or a lot of institutions aren't focusing on quite yet. Um, but I do believe that if you reach that goal of, yes, we have a space of belonging for everybody, then you've reached all of the other levels too. You are diverse, you're accessible, you're inclusive,
Mhm.
and you're equitable. Because if you're all of those things, there's just a little bit more to do in order to make it a space of belonging. Um, and so, yes, the area of belonging, it's part of this umbrella um, acronym, which is DEAIB, for those of us who use acronyms. So yes, that's accurate.
Okay. All right. Sort of bringing more attention to like your current work and what you're doing right now. What are like your favorite parts of your profession, and what is some of like the hardest parts of your work?
Yeah, so my favorite is definitely, like I started to mention before, working with people. I sometimes am not very, what's the word I'm looking for? I really get energy from being around other people, and in particular, people who are passionate and excited and curious, and I guess anyone who is working towards making the world around them a little bit better. And I'm lucky that all of my students are that way, and people in my professional community are that way. And so it gives me a lot of joy and satisfaction to be able to talk with and meet and learn from all of these people. And that's definitely my favorite part, and something that gives me energy and purpose when I come into work. It is something I'm really grateful for. And I don't think everyone gets to have that. Um, the hardest part, which I also started to mention before, is when you know that you yourself and all the people that you work so closely with, students and others in your professional field, when you know that you've all worked really hard to try to meet a particular goal, or make your vision come true, it is really hard when all of that work is then squashed due to someone saying, actually, no, we can't make all of that happen. And so that's happened to me several times. And there's one particular case that I think would dishearten most people. Um, and I feel like sharing it now. I don't know if I'm going to change my mind afterwards. I'm a sharer. That's just who I am. Um, so shortly after there was a very visible national movement, the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Shortly after, actually during and after that, me and other colleagues at MIT and MIT Museum worked really closely and really passionately on anti-racist initiatives here at the museum and at MIT as a whole. Um, so I worked closely with a few other professionals in doing some community listening, in gathering people together, taking the time to make note of everyone's thoughts and contributions to what is important in an anti-racist institution, doing research on what makes a museum anti-racist, doing a lot of background research in what other museums are doing, what works, what doesn't work, what's important, and what needs to be done. And after doing all of that, being told that this work is not going to be implemented. That work being uncompensated And for me being the only woman of color on this board who was working on this was just too many layers of disappointment for me. And to see that happen and to know this happens over and over again, that the labor of women of color in particular is uncompensated, unappreciated, or disregarded, um, isn't very encouraging and definitely doesn't foster a sense of belonging. And so that is the hardest part of the work that I do. And I don't have any silver lining to to tell you after that. Um, except that I hope that it gets better. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. And I think it's a great segue into sort of the next set of questions that we have on like representation of women in STEM. I guess you just like mentioned sort of this uncompensated work of looking a lot into how you can make your institution anti-racist and working with other people on that. Um, and especially being like a woman of color and not having that work being recognized. Are there any other challenges that you faced as a woman of color in STEM? And could you share if there are any instances where you've overcome that?
Yeah. This is a really big question because I think it again goes back to very early life. And it all, I think what people may not uh, be aware of is that it's cumulative. So it's not just like, oh, she's in this position or she's in this role. Maybe you see a powerful woman of color in STEM and you think, well, shouldn't she be happy there or satisfied now that she's reached that goal? But it is likely after many years of struggle for a lot of us and constantly pushing back to people telling you you are there aren't good enough, you don't belong, or you only got there because of special treatment or something like that. And so from a very young age, um, I mean, I have memories of, applying to colleges and teachers saying, "So why are you applying to such prestigious schools? Like what makes you interested in going to such." Um, and it's just like constantly being told like, "No, you don't deserve what you're trying to achieve." Um, or you haven't earned it, or you're taking it away from me, and this like sense of um trying to find someone to blame for your own misfortune is a tale as old as time. Trying to find someone to blame for something bad going on in the world. It is deeply embedded in our history in the United States. It is something that continues on today, that interconnects every aspect of someone's identity. It contributes to the very specific set of challenges or experiences, or in some wonderful ways, the privileges of your experience in your identity. There's a lot of things about who I am that I love and adore, and I'm so grateful for because I get to have those experiences. As a woman, I get to experience the joys of pregnancy and motherhood. It is a privilege and that not everyone has. And it's not just because I'm a woman, but it is a part of my womanhood that I identify with. Um, and so there's nothing that I would remove from my experience or my identity. I don't have any shame or regret in being proud of who I am, where I come from, and how I got to where I am today. At the same time, there have been many times where I had to remind myself that yes, I do deserve this. I worked hard for it. I do belong. And um, having to squash other people's voices and knowing um, that I'm not the only one who's gone through that. And sort of knowing that you're almost doing it for yourself, but for everyone else who looks like you or is like you, um, which is an interesting experience, I think, and something special and something to be proud of, especially in a role where you work with youth or students. Um, is not only are you doing your work for yourself, but you're doing it for all of your students and you're doing it for your children if you have them. And so, yes, um, there have been times where I had to face some ugliness or I had to push against barriers. Then there are other times where I think it can be a really wonderful and powerful thing to find those people or those spaces where you help each other up. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's clear, but
That
those
is
are all my thoughts and feelings.
That is clear, and I definitely think that's something that you're actively doing with like your teen council and teen internship, or at least as long as I've gotten to know you in this past year. So thank you for sharing that. Could you like expand more on like what are your thoughts of how like representation of women in STEM and gender minorities in STEM sort of impact like STEM innovation and also like the aspirations of young people going into those fields?
So it's really interesting that there's still so much work to be done in diversity of gender representation in STEM because it is well documented that diversity is a good thing and is the first thing that you do in order to have innovation and progress. And that is because diverse opinions, diverse life experiences contribute to the most ideas and contribute to a place with really the most creative solutions. Because ultimately, if you have everyone, a homogenous group of people with all of the same experiences and all of the same ideas, then you're not going to solve all of the problems because they didn't even think about all of the problems. um, Ultimately, there are reasons and and it's not just because like oh we haven't tried hard enough to have diverse representation of people in STEM. There are people ready and willing to pursue these careers. There are forces actively going against those young people who are trying to follow this path or this journey. Deeply embedded structural racism is a complex story and reality. Um, and there are many layers, and it embeds every single aspect of our culture and society. Within racism, there is sexism, there's misogyny, and it all really comes together in the same way. It is all part of this same hierarchy, which keeps certain people in power and prevents others from gaining power. In order to break that down, requires radical changes. And so this is something that I think requires very lengthy discussion or solution building. However, I don't want anyone to feel like, okay, well, then we should just give up. Like, oh, it's so big and bad that I can't do anything about it. That's not true. You can. Everyone can. And it starts at the dinner table. It starts in conversations with your peers. It starts with speaking up. If you have agency and power in a situation, using it, whether it's in the workplace or in the home. It involves teaching people in your own family values and ideas that really support everyone by supporting the vision that there aren't some races or some sexes that are better than others. It is really a simple concept, and yet such a pervasive issue that um, sometimes it's not seen or it's brushed aside as being harmless because it is so pervasive. Um, and it can be exhausting for those of us who have to live it every day, um, which is why I push anyone I know with power in their race or their sex or their gender or their religion to or their sexuality to speak up as someone with potentially more social power than another person in a particular situation, because sometimes they're listened to by other people in that same position of power. And it is exhausting for someone who is being told that they're less than to have to speak up for themselves at all times. And it does feel like you're speaking up for yourself, even if other people around you don't think that you are. For example, let's say you're having a meal with some friends and family, and the company around you is of multiple genders, multiple races, etc. There are sometimes aspects of someone's identity that are not visible. And there are times where you speak up for someone that you don't know is there, but is in fact there. And I think that sometimes we brush aside comments because we think, oh, well, no one here is going to be personally offended by that, so I'm just going to let it go. Whether it's visible or an invisible aspect of someone's identity, if you ever hear or notice in any personal or professional capacity potential harm being done, it's just something to remind yourself that those tiny cuts build over time. And it would be great if someone didn't have to be so incredibly resilient to get past it in order to get to where they want to go. And it would be much more fair of a world if these barriers and these very real this very real harm isn't done by your friends and family or your professional peers. Um, And yes, it is a lot of work to do all of this in that social delicate manner that actually gets the point across in a way that is accepted. Um, but I think it is doable. You can do it. And we can help each other do it. Um, so yeah, I think that's what I'll say on that.
You. I guess, like, sort of going back to earlier in our interview, what is something that you would tell young Melissa, sort of starting her STEM career and trajectory, with some advice that you would give her?
Yeah, I would tell her that she is good enough. She does belong, and she's very capable. These are things I tell my daughter all of the time. Anytime she's working on something. And yeah, I think it can be that simple.
Yeah, and then is there any additional guidance you would offer anyone watching this interview thinking about their aspirations in like a career in STEM?
Yeah. I think ultimately all you really need is yourself and your own like belief in yourself. Because unfortunately sometimes that's all you have. At the same time, if you ever see or meet someone who's willing to be there for you or support you, and they offer you, then they say, let me know whenever you need anything. Take them up on it. Don't feel bad for asking for help. Everyone gets help. You might not see it, but everyone who has privilege and power, they're getting there through connections and through people who look like them helping them get there. And so that's part of the process. And so never feel badly for taking people up on those kinds of offers. It is does not take away from your own abilities, or your own talents or what you deserve. It is something that we try to pay forward. And I've had women, for example, in my college and personal life be there for me. And they've said to me, and I've sat there, having lunch with a neuroscience professor at college and thinking, wow, she's really taking time out of her day to advise me on what I should do with my life, career wise. And I'm just sitting there incredibly grateful and thinking, how do I deserve to take this woman's time? And she just says to me, like, someone did this for me, and I'm doing this for you. And that's important. And so paying it forward once you get to where you want to go, um, and making the most of every opportunity that you see. If you feel like it's something you'd like. Um, I also want to say at the same time, no pressure. Like, I think that sometimes someone might feel that they begin to pursue a particular career, a particular journey, and then they feel an intense pressure to excel in that career or to somehow do the hardest thing that they can do. Um, but ultimately, reflecting on what's important to you and what you value in your life and being confident in that choice. Like for me, for example, um, just being on a journey in STEM and it looking maybe different than I thought it would, or shifting and changing over time. I think ultimately the conversation is longer. Like, for example, me, I'm leaving the workforce to be a stay-at-home parent. And yes, it is my personal choice and something I'm excited about. At the same time, there is it is well documented that when women leave the workforce to raise children, it changes your future career and your future income. dramatically compared to men. This gender disparity is a problem because it may lead to limited choices or options for those women compared to their maybe potentially male partners. Parenthood and motherhood shouldn't be punished. It really shouldn't. Um, so that's a longer conversation. At the same time, though, I think anyone should feel, and I would love them to feel empowered to make choices that are right for them and to have the opportunities to reach them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those beautiful words of advice. So this concludes our interview. Thank you so much for being here. It's truly been an honor to speak to you through this interview and also just, having the pleasure to get to know you over the past year through the teen internship. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ashi, for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Um, and I'm really proud of everything you've done and all of this this website with all of these really cool people that you're interviewing. I can't wait to see all of them.